President Trump has been fighting fake news all year long.
False and fake. You are fake news.
This is what he tweeted. The summit with Russia was a great success, except for the real enemy of the people, the fake news media.
Horrific week for the fake news media.
Fake news. And we're just doing our jobs. We're unbiased. It's fake news. It was fake news.
Fake news. Fake news. Fake news. Fake news.
Fake news. Fake news.
Are we fake news, Kellyanne? Is CNN fake news?
They're just not true.
Attacking fake news, but
Fake news.
It is about being absolutely and wholly objective. It all goes back to being objective when you look at the facts, being skeptical, being critical, being open if the research or the information you get doesn't align with what you thought it was going to be, and delivering it honestly. And with science, that's a lot easier because we can, as I said, follow the scientific method. And for well-trained journalists whose sole goal is to collect all the information and deliver it to a public, especially for talk about political news, to be that watchdog of politicians. I am a scientist, and so my job is to follow the scientific method and follow the ethical and moral standards of being a political scientist, which part of that is following the scientific method, and the other part of it is asking and answering questions in ways that are to help and that are to shed light and give information to things going on in the world that aren't coming from one particular place. And so when you follow the scientific method, it is all about rigor, it's all about validity, reliability, and making sure that you're following each part as it is supposed to be.
Right now, NCTV 17 locally has a lot of credibility. I think lots of people have tried to sway us one way or the other, and therefore I've taken a lot of flack. But we have stayed true to being just as fair as we possibly can be. But I really think we've had a biased all through journalism. I think right now it's more evident and there's more sources for it. So if you want to be only hear from one particular viewpoint, you can easily find that because there are so many sources for news. So I think journalism has always had a little bit of a bias. It's just now you have a lot more of it, so now you think you have a lot more bias, where I feel it's pretty even.
You can watch Fox, you can watch MSNBC, and the way the people react, the language that print reporters use shows you can almost tell their politics pretty quickly. So there are many more ways to kind of see people's bias or biases being influencing the information they're giving. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because we're human beings. We have biases and prejudices, and I think it's better to just kind of outright say this is how I see it, and know that that's kind of clouding the information they're giving you.
Kellyanne Conway, one of the things that she coined the term alternative facts, which is like not a thing, right? I mean, facts are facts. Truth, although Rudy Giuliani says truth is not truth, you know, we should all be able to agree when information is presented to us that has been validated, we should all be able to look at it and agree in that it is all true.
In my mind, there's nothing, if something's a fact or it's not a fact, so you don't have to, it's proven or disproven. I think it's been really dangerous the way that we've had the phrase fake news accommodated, or what's the correct word, appropriated in the last couple of years. It used to literally mean erroneous information. You would label a story if there was wrong facts. Clearly you could say that was fake news.
I feel that people do not trust news sources right now because there are so many, and not all news sources and media sources are backed up by a credible source or have checks and balances or are run by those who have been educated in journalism or in another field that would lend to, you know, an authority figure. So now anybody can do that, and that's led for a bias. What can we do about it right now? I just think you have to keep fact-checking and decide who you want to believe. As a consumer, as a journalist, again, I think you have to decide who you're going to be as a journalist. It is, most of us go into being a journalist because we think it's a little bit glamorous, and then we really quickly learn how not glamorous the news is.
When you have so many different places to go get information, and depending on who owns, there's like 6 companies that own all of the US or the world media, and they want ratings and clicks and all of that. And so they're going to give the consumer what the consumer wants. So you look at Fox News, which is the most watched cable news network ever. There's a certain kind of viewer that wants to have certain kind of information and wants their biases confirmed, and so they want to give them that information. MSNBC is the same, it just doesn't have the same viewership. So because there's so many ways to get news, and because it's all driven by ratings and clicks and profit, you're going to give the consumer what they ask for, and we want our biases confirmed.
In the dynamics I've worked in mostly, which were print newsrooms, and from small ones to very large ones, you get kind of, you have the individual. So most of the individuals I worked with were much more left-leaning. There's just a lot of people in journalism that are left-leaning. But you would have management, which would be more on the conservative side. So management might decide what kind of stories they want to see being given to the public. So they make those decisions, but then the individual goes out and reports it, and the people they select, the information they choose to put in their story, can reinforce their own biases. So you kind of have this dueling. It can come from the management side of things, which has, it's got a bias that's kind of filtering down. And then you always have the individual, you have the editor who takes that work and then makes changes to it. So even that, by changing a word here and there, can insert the other bias. My point being that it's much more convoluted than people think. There's not just one mandate that comes down. We are a conservative organization and everybody writes that way. That's just not how it works. Biases can be just exposed in many different ways, just based on the combination of writer and editor, or content producer, and whoever the web person is who's putting the story out. So there's all kinds of fingers that can get into a story or a piece of content and shift it a little bit.
Our discipline in particular is maligned often for not being scientific and for being biased, but I get real frustrated about that.
I always tell people just to check your bias. Know what it is. If you're a very, very ultra left-leaning person and you have to do a story that portrays the views of a conservative group in your community, make sure that you're doing your best to acknowledge how you feel about this, but that you are there to do one purpose, and it's not to expose your feelings on it, but to talk about this other group and their mission or their goals or their agenda. We're human, we have our biases, just know what they are and know when to set them aside. So a journalist if you're a vegan and you have to go interview cattle farmers and on a cattle farm, it could be a very difficult assignment for you. You don't believe in the work they do. You may have very strong opinions about the work they do slaughtering cows. So you have to realize that and still treat the people with the same respect you would any other source.
It's hard, overcoming a bias, because it's something that's so deeply rooted in someone, right? And so the first step is to admit that you have them, right? The first step is knowing you have a problem. Obviously I have biases. I favor certain news sources. I favor certain policies because I'm an educated person, right? But it's what I do with it.
We try to remember that no story has just 2 sides. It usually has like 5 or 6 or 12. And that we try to tell the story as completely as we possibly can. I try to make sure it's always opinion-based, and the people in the video or in the news story, not my opinion. My opinion doesn't count.
And know, how your language is maybe being, is affecting or influencing people. So watch the words you choose. Make sure you're balancing your sources. Do I always go to the same people who agree with my side of things to get affirmation? Am I mixing up this stuff? Am I finding new people to bring into my content to make sure that I'm trying to see as many sides as possible? More and more journalists are letting opinions slip into their stories, into their the content that they're creating. I think you just have to surround yourself with a lot of different viewpoints. Look to people sometimes more than organizations, so find reporters or journalists that you like their work in whatever form. So maybe it's one reporter from Vice you like, another one from the New York Times, someone from NPR. Kind of follow all of these people, and the more you dive into it, you start to be able to see the different distinctions between what is good reported information. Generally, that's because you're seeing lots of people having the same, verified by different sources, but the same conclusion or the same information. That helps you to know that this is being vetted and this is true.
I think it's best for people to read a variety of sources. So I think when you're on social media, you need to push yourself to try a different news source. If you're always reading the Chicago Tribune, then you need to go read the Washington Post or the New York Times, or vice versa. Or if you're not reading any of that, you need to force yourself into that, or maybe you need to go check out a blog. But I think you have to have a variety, and then you have to kind of make a decision yourself. That's the positive of all this, is it forces us to engage and make our own decisions, as opposed to being led.
Well, at first it was, we just can't agree. We can't agree on things, so we agree to disagree, right? And it has now transformed into this thing where we hate each other for it. We make assumptions about the other side if we know what their favorite website is. And it takes time, but it is so worth it, because there have been things that I was sure were true, and then when I've done my research, they were not true. And that's important, to be able to go through that process.
So I think bias will always be there, and I think it works best when it's close to 50-50 or 60-40, and right now some may argue that it's 70-30. Again, it's because we have so many news sources. Everybody can be a news source, and they don't have a physical building or employees. They're just a Facebook group or a social media group of some sort. That deteriorates news. So I think we need to figure out a different way to give those folks a voice, because I don't want to take their voice away. That's what we're built on here in America, is our voice. But not everybody can claim to be media. We need to have some type of certification. Can I get a stamp or something that says, hey, real media? I don't know. But that's the key problem, is that we just have everybody stating their opinion, and that's a good thing, but then you got too many cooks in the kitchen.